Okay, welcome back everyone to episode 3 of the AI Academics. Vugar is back from vacation. I'm glad that we get a chance to chat again. I'm super happy. If you find us online on our social networks and you're tuning into this in either one of Vugar's channels or one of my channels, we try to have a broad reach and get this out there for everyone. To just kind of tune in and chat with us a little bit about our adventures in the creator world, as well as the bits and pieces of AI that we encounter and some of the advice that we deal with and that we give feedback for. And so I think I just chatted with Vugar. Let's get started maybe with a little bit of a chat of what happened recently on social media. Been posting a couple of, so I think we both kind of always experiment, like what kind of stuff do you post and like how does it fare and how does that all go. And one of the things that I identified a couple of weeks ago is just like posting lo-fi images seems to be like a thing that works really well on X right now, which was a little bit funny. So just been scouring Pinterest and trying out some of the stuff and just like reposting things that I thought were cool and interesting. And like one of them really took off, which was a storytelling framework kind of thing that I found. I don't even have a source for that, just found it on Pinterest. I think it's like somebody posted it on Reddit at some point. You never know where this stuff comes from, but like one of the interesting things is here that I didn't expect that people are so interested in story, and it seems to be a thing that is beyond just academia, that people seem to have an interest in how you tell stories and what stories mean for everything, really, like whether or not it's the facts and figures in our academic papers, or this idea that you also tell a story to sell your product or tell a story to build your brand and things like that. And I just maybe wanted to get some of Vugar's idea or ideas, as he is telling stories every week with his YouTube channel. He's telling stories that are tutorials essentially, but maybe, Vugar, do you have an idea of, or maybe you can give us some insights if you're building tutorials, like software tutorials, as in like, first you got to do this and you got to do that. Is there any way that you think a story would be beneficial for that, when you're really just kind of walking people through the process of this is how the software works? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, hey Leonard, hey everyone. It's again really lovely to be back and talking to you again our lovely topics. So academia, AI, and everything related to that. And storytelling, I think as human beings, we all love stories. We love reading them. And if we cannot read, we love watching them through different channels, streaming channels, Netflix, or anything else. Why we watch movies? Because we love stories. We love stories. We love follow them. We love to see the culmination points and the ending of it. So why we start reading a novel or anything? Why we start reading a story? Because we love them. We love to learn about the other stuff. And the meaning of that, the main aim here is to learn from it and to implement it if we can in our own lives, or benefit from it, or at least take something from it that could be helpful in our lives. So that is, I mean, that is the core of our nature, that we love stories because we have our own story, which is currently going on, and we love to learn from other stories. And as human beings, since we really love to read stories and to follow stories easily, and if you tell anything in a story format, it can attract the attention. So for example, the data, the numbers, everything, yes, they might be good, but at the same time, they might be boring, but and less attractive. But if you follow a story structure, at least I try to do that in my tutorials as well, since you asked. So when I before even doing a YouTube video, I have a plan on my mind. Then as I think I mentioned this one in before in our previous live sessions. Like I open the Word file, I speak loud my all ideas, what I want to do in my, so that's a story. So I have a very draft version of the story that I'm planning to deliver in my tutorial. And then I take this text, it is full of grammatic problems, spelling errors, and anything, and then put this, for example, now these days I use the Claude, especially 3.5 Sonnet version is doing really good. And I put this very small story there, and I say that the tool I am planning to cover in my video tutorial, this, and this is my story, please write a transcript for me. And then it writes a transcript. So this is the story based on my original story. And then I edit it again, reading it again. So this is my story, and I read it again. So I have a very nice structure on my head before recording, before doing this screen recording for any tool that I have. For example, I did one last week. It is also AI tool. So I did exactly I followed the exactly same rules and structure for that tool as well, because it helps me and it also delivers something valuable. If you do something just spontaneously without a structure, people I think have difficulties to follow where it starts, where to reach the point that I want to deliver, and where it ends. And what I want, what is my end message, what is the purpose of this video. So I think each good video tutorial or anything else has a good story. I think you mentioned, actually, I am also one of the good followers of your emails, the newsletters, because you mentioned a lot of time this storytelling, how you can write your, for example, your PhD dissertation as a story, because you have something to tell. And if you can tell it in an interesting and story structured way, it would be more interesting for the reader without getting into trouble. So that is my understanding of the story. I love stories, reading them and writing them now, if I can, on my Medium channel, and of course with my video tutorials. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, I noticed that too, that on Medium there's a bit more space. And of course, in our newsletters, there's a bit more space to kind of explore these things. Of course, it's much shorter, but I like to kind of bring a personal angle in there as well. And of course, now that we have these AI tools, one of the interesting things is so some people always say, like, why do you need frameworks, right? And some writers are completely anti-frameworks. Now, in academia, a lot of our writing is framework driven. It's IMRED structure for a lot of the articles. It's a very clear structure we follow for a lot of things. And so knowing a framework, knowing a structure can actually be beneficial when you're getting writing aid from your AI writing assistants. And like just what you said, when you're kind of talking through the stuff in your head, and now with the help of AI transcribers, it's much easier to get a little bit of feedback on, or not feedback, but get everything onto the computer a little bit quicker, and then work with the assistant and the transcript to get feedback and work on the story that's in your words, and kind of help you identify maybe some of the points, because you can, of course, if you use Otter or other tools, you can chat with the transcript, and it becomes easier if you have a framework to kind of look for, okay, what was the inciting incident here? Or like, what can I phrase as an antagonist? What can I phrase as a protagonist of the story that I'm trying to tell here? And really having these core elements in there can be kind of helpful. There was this thing that I talked about in my newsletter that was called Dramatica, the Dramatica structure, which was I think is just a really nice way of doing a structured way of framing a story. I'm gonna just put up the newsletter link here. Let's see if I can just pop that in for people that are interested. So if you are interested in reading that, I wrote about that in my newsletter. It's a way to kind of check this out here on the top corner. But yeah, this is just a structuring that helps you work through some of these tenets of a good story. So it helps you frame your thoughts in a way that are maybe a little bit more engaging, a little bit more exciting in the way that you're broadcasting these things to people. And so I think that's a really helpful part of building building any sort of engaging text online these days, and thinking about really how can I frame this as a even just a simple juxtaposition. So if you're looking at hook writing, for example, which a lot of us do when we write for social media, specifically when we write like slightly longer form content, there's some sort of a juxtaposition that usually happens at the beginning, as in like, here is somebody in point A and there is something in point B, and you're throwing rocks at that thing so that you're saying, okay, I position myself against this. Immediately you have some sort of friction moment, which then leads to a more engaging story to come after. And of course, the same is true for academic writing. We identify a problem at the beginning. That's what we're throwing rocks at. It's like in storytelling frameworks, like getting somebody up a tree, or whatever the metaphors are, is always the same. So something needs to be out of the ordinary, even if if you look at the hero's journey, you're leaving the ordinary world and going into that extraordinary space, right? So it's always that idea of, okay, something is in juxtaposition to the status quo, and here we are trying to fix it. Of course, if you're looking at it from the lens of research paradigms, this is a very positivist paradigm to accept, as in like, we're problem fixers and we kind of want to find ways that we can embrace but also work against the problem. But it is a really interesting way to frame a narrative of a research finding, and to work through research facts that you might have. So I think it's just a nice way of looking at that and comparing that. And so, yeah, I think it is definitely underestimated. Yeah. And so we see a couple of people dropping in. So Ibrahim said hi earlier. Here's Dr. Swaraj Wadankari saying hi to everyone. So we just want to say hi to all of the people that are dropping into this video right now. Thanks so much for tuning in with us. Feel free at any point in time here to, of course, post your questions and to check in with us. We'd definitely love to answer them on the show. It's a live show, of course, so we're happy to do that. It's later archived in our podcast. Okay, so yeah, all of that being said, like, this is, I think, where the AI assistants are super helpful, right? They can help us kind of identify structurally in our writing how we can build it around these story elements that can then enhance a little bit of the thing that we're telling to people. Yeah. But did you have anything to add? Because otherwise I was going to be like, I also had this
Yeah,
interesting discussion the other day, so I want to talk about that as well.
I'm going to connect this topic with the AI, since you already started. So maybe I can ask a question to you. Do you think that AI can deliver a story in a way that the human beings do? Or so I mean, I still have a lot of hesitation. At the moment, they cannot do, because they work on the patterns based, finding the patterns in the text, because our brain, I think, totally works in a different way. If I am wrong, please correct me.
Mm.
Or if anyone from our audience, please correct us if we say something wrong, or if you want to add anything, not only questions, just any valuable comment or anything else are welcomed. And so my impression from the AI tools that I used until today, the ChatGPT, Claude AI, Gemini, and other many dedicated AI tools, that they cannot still deliver the text in a way that our brains can do. And but there's a way, like giving the better questions and asking better questions, these tools may be helpful, or at least to direct them to the point that they can mimic, or they can replicate what we do. So what do you think about it, Leonard?
Yeah, I mean, replication is always that's an interesting topic. Yeah, can you elaborate just kind of how you understand that concept a little bit for me before I
I
dig in
mean,
there?
for example, if I think we will jump to the topic with the prompt engineering and the prompting as well, but
Yeah.
with the delivering story, because so as I said before, recording my video tutorial, I'm trying to come up with the story on my head.
Hmm.
Then I put it on the Word file. So this story, starting from the scratch, starting from the zero. So I
Yeah.
have, of course, I have some previous knowledge, because without knowing the tool, or without having this previous knowledge, I cannot deliver anything.
True.
But the AI tools that we use do not work the same way that our brain works, because they only first, for example, if you ask a question about the Eiffel Tower or Paris, they try to find these patterns in the previous knowledge uploaded to this AI tool and to come up with the answer to your question if you are asking anything about. So do you think that the AI is different than our brains, or what do you know about in general? I mean,
I think of course the some of the creativity elements are still the elements where AI is completely lacking, right? So I think this is something to keep in mind as you know, we're seeing it in creative professions being more used for brainstorming and other things, which
yeah,
is really I think can be quite a powerful way to prompt it in a way that helps you generate new ideas just by opposing you. But the ideas are usually happening in your head, right? So this is something to really understand as you're working with assistants and frameworks, is you're using it to generate new ideas in your head, and you're trying to understand how it all kind of ties together um, into sort of a coherent whole. And so that coherent whole is not necessarily coming from AI. Like AI can, you know, do a well-formed prediction. Essentially, any LLM that you work with will do a well-formed prediction based on the input that you give it, but that prediction doesn't necessarily take, you know, a sidestep of your like you can try to instruct it, of course, in a way that will help you get there. So if you kind of instruct it really with Edward de Bono's six thinking heads method, and you kind of prompt it to be six different agents talking to one another, I think that's sort of where the next level of some of this stuff
exactly.
happens, where you're working with sort of a multi-agent AI. So instead of you just prompting the one agent or the one LLM that you're used to from, you know, the Chat GPT or Claude interactions, you're instead talking to a bunch of different AIs that are also talking to each other. And I think this is where some of the magic can happen, because there's different backgrounds, different stances are being put together in what's somehow an artificial discussion, but because of your human input, it can help get you there quicker. It can help that whole some of the creativity stuff is all about, okay, take this thing, gather it, but then put it out of context. And by being out of
Mhm.
context, you spawn new ideas in your head. And so some of
Yeah.
these methods can really help you put yourself out of that context and help you spawn some of those new ideas quickly, so that you just have a better idea of how that all um, could relate beyond your boundaries that you're usually thinking in. So I think this is a really nice way to, yeah, help you brainstorm, help you come up with new ideas. And it's also the thing
Mhm.
that with using these agents is it's also much quicker than the usual way to get there. So and this is why this comes back to this idea of frameworks, and why I think frameworks, as much as a lot of really creative people frown upon them, in the age of AI, frameworks really help you get the most out of your work with an assistant, because you can help the assistant understand within the framework how it should put something together. I think that's really a nice way of putting that. And so yeah, it's, of course, there's a lot of, yeah, trying to make sense of it. But we just got a question on the show. Maybe you want to take this one because you're in Europe. Thanks a lot from Mishan. What is your opinion about the European Act on AI? So
Yeah,
I'm actually not on top of that. So maybe start with that, and I'll look into that while you do that.
yeah. Thank you, Leonard, and also thank you, Mission Malka, MedEd, for this question. Actually, I wrote a very short article about this on my Medium channel. If
I'll see if I can
it's
find it real
there,
quick.
yeah, and yeah, I haven't read it all, but I tried to at least read the parts which is related, specifically the high risk AI applications like critical infrastructure, healthcare, and law enforcement. So basically, this AI Act So EU AI Act means more stringent rules for high risk AI, like as I said, for the infrastructure, healthcare, and law enforcement. So they will face more stringent requirements around testing and, for example, risk management or human oversight to ensure that they are safe and technically robust. And there are a lot of ban cases, like on controversial use cases, like if the use cases violate the fundamental rights. For example, basically I can say that you cannot use the AI in the space of European. Yeah, that's the link to the article. Yeah, thank you, Leonard. And so in China, they broadly use the AI to control almost the movements of the people, the facial recognition, the
Yeah.
everything. But this AI acts at EU level because what is accepted at EU level, then they transplant into the national legislations. Of course, there is a transformation time. Usually, it takes 2 years or something like that. And so, and national levels, there will be laws in each country that are aligning with this EU AI Act. So you cannot use AI Act basically to control every movement. The facial, for example, it is for police, it is for any, let's say, public structures. They cannot use the AI to the degree that they want to use. There should be some, let's say, strict rules on it, and only in very certain cases they mention this, like national emergency or at the highest level or similar cases you can refer to the use of AI. And there are some rules about the penalties, like I think it's up to 35 million euros or even the 7% of the global annual revenue. For example, in the case of Google or Facebook, so 35 million euros for these companies is nothing. In those cases, they have these penalties who the companies not aligning with the EU AI Act, they can face up to 7% of their global annual revenue. So I don't want to go the details of all details. Basically, it regulates the high risk AI
Yeah.
areas, as I said, specifically the infrastructure, the controlling, the supervising, or as it is done in China. So to put stringent rules on this, and they also put some stringent rules on the healthcare use cases of the AI, and also the law enforcement will face more requirements with this AI. So feel free to read that article if you have any comment, or if you can reach me on Twitter if you need more information.
Yeah.
I can do that.
I think that's a really good summary, and I think one of the things that we have to be aware is the disclosure of AI use, and so this is definitely one of the
Exactly.
things that is happening more and more. That companies actually give you the possibility as you're creating these images or as you're creating. Um, I think it's mainly for digital media, really, that you have some sort of watermark in the file, or that it's like clear what it's used for. And I think that's specifically true when you're looking at, for me, it's the big two is 11 Labs and HeyGen, the two big companies that are sort of in that space. We discussed that in the last episode a little bit, where it's so easy to clone your voice and clone your digital experience now with these professional tools, that yeah, there has to be some limitation as this is happening. Of course, the companies will advertise the benefits, and I'm a user of both of these tools with my research group as well. It makes a lot of stuff easier for us, like making a quick educational video or having you narrate an audiobook kind of situation. These are really cool use cases and super useful, where otherwise you'd have to spend hours in doing that stuff. Again, speeding up things in a productive way is actually a good way of dealing with that. But of course, the downside is, as we discussed in the last episode, the digital cloning bit and doing something without your consent and like really hitting that gray area. It's not really a gray area. It's kind of a black area, to be honest. Like, you shouldn't be doing that. It's simple. Don't do it. But it's definitely, I think, something where companies struggle with the ethical use. And for me, it's quite interesting because a lot of my research is in games, and we've had a similar phenomenon in the video game world when publisher models shifted, and a lot of companies embraced this monetization strategy of pay to play. And you might know this from your mobile phone or casual games that you play, where people are all about, just people don't need to do a long interaction with the game. It can be a short interaction with the game as long as they make a little bit of money during that interaction. And that's really against this whole idea of what video games should be doing. They should be giving you sort of a happiness and like a fulfillment of being engaged with it. And so, I think that's sort of one of the downsides that come with that, and that in a similar way there can be an exploitative potential for AI. We actually recently wrote three papers that are coming up at the KaiPlay conference on deceptive design, where we're looking at what deceptive design does in this specific context. So I think deceptive design is a really interesting area to look into, as in like how companies can potentially exploit this. But I think Michelle had another question. ACT tries to regulate human use of AI, but not AI itself. Is it possible to do the latter? Can you actually regulate AI? That's a really, really interesting question, right?
If we ask this question, it means we treat AI as a conscious matter, as something which is independent from human beings.
Yeah,
it is
the
not,
generative
not
AGI thing, right? The artificial generative intelligence idea.
Or even let's say we have this AGI, if we control it, it is not independent because it works under our supervision. That is, this questions feels like AI is something totally independent from human beings,
which
and
it
we
is
need
not,
to,
really
which,
not. Yeah.
which, at the moment it is not. I don't know whether it will be. I don't believe so, but that's the way. And one of the problems with this AI Act, people who live in Europe complain that we don't love to create or to develop, but to regulate it, because the AI tools coming from the other edges of the world, like, but I don't agree with this, because I checked the patent, European Patent Committee, if I don't recall the name correctly, but there are many things happening in Europe as well, which contradicts this idea that EU is only regulating but not creating. So going back to the storytelling. So how we get the best result from AI tools if we want a good results? I think that comes out from the prompting. If you have like what it, how much good experience do you have with prompting, and do you feel that if you give better prompt you get better results from AI tools like ODI, ChatGPT? What does your experience say to you, Leonard?
I think that's one of the ways in which we're headed, really, in terms of a human skill, that people that are going onto the job market these days really have to embrace that as part of their core skill set. And it's quite interesting how all of that is happening, because this is something I chatted about that with a colleague recently, that said, hey, you know what? We're in software engineering, we're building, these new products and everything, but there is always the very clear, it's for them, it's not even a maybe, or like some of my students are still like, oh, it's a secret tool, it's a secret weapon that I can use. It's really not anymore. It's kind of a requirement these days. So if you're looking at some of these startups employing people, they're really looking at, can you leverage prompting as a skill? A lot of like some of these micro games companies that I talked about, a lot of them are using, whether or not you agree with that is a different story, but a lot of them are using it. They're using it to build gameplay dynamics. They're using it to build story in their games. They're using it to build assets for their games. It's really like a wraparound process these days, because one person that knows how to prompt it in a way that makes this work for them can be way more productive than a person just doing it all the traditional manual way by themselves. Of course, there's caveats to that. There is a whole discussion. Some of it we already had in other episodes about, the ethical boundaries of the training data that you're using as you're engaging with these models. Definitely something to think about. But no one can deny that despite these discussions, it's one of the things that are kind of here to stay, to be honest. One of the things for my fellow people in the UX design space and that are interested in user experience research and design, one of the things that's happening is you've seen Framer and Wizard as some of the tools that made it really easy to do vector shape wireframes and kind of these images. But now Figma is one of the biggest tools out there for creating sort of vector shaped designs, but also having the opportunity to really build prototypes really quickly. And they've embraced AI now. So a lot of the core grind skills that you used to have, where you had to find in the menu how you do stuff. A lot of that stuff is going away probably within the next year, and it will come down to how explicit can you prompt within these tools to get the wireframe that you need, or to create the octagon shape or whatever. So just think about it in terms of time savings. Back in the day, you use your mouse and your keyboard, you draw the shape or whatever, you put it together. Now you just put it in a single prompt, and of course, the more often you do it, the more you know what to ask for. And it's sort of you're going from entry-level UX designer or entry-level UX researcher to sort of a mid-level manager, where the AI is now your entry-level assistant that you have to give explicit instructions on how to get you some of those core assets, and then to make them work with the rest of the design together. So in that space, it's super common. In software engineering, it becomes super common. There's a lot of companies working on these sort of supportive software engineers that you're they work with you on the code. So we had this was like half a year ago when they introduced that pair programmer. I forgot the name, but that went sort of semi-viral with this sort of idea that now you have a software engineer by your side. Of course, a lot of people using GitHub have used Copilot. It's actually, I had a AI lecture for high school teachers that told me, we're using that in class now. We're using that to teach coding to the students. And I actually think it's fantastic. It's really, and a lot of people that even do casual coding have been elevated to new heights with that, because instead of having to go to Stack Exchange or having to search in the internet for your debug error, you just feed the debug error to Claude or to GPT, and you get your you get your feedback instantly. And usually, depending on how you do the follow-up prompt, it gets better and better at giving you the ideas. I think one of the things that really blew people's minds when Claude 3.5 came out, the Sonnet version that we currently have. Now, Opus, people were already like excited, but Opus was so expensive, so it was actually like super expensive to use it. But Claude 3.5 made it all much cheaper. And one of the things that really made people wonder was the capabilities of the one-shot prompting. And of course, we talked about some prompting or different prompting strategies in our AI webinar before, where we kind of discussed what's possible there. But I think one of the important, interesting things here is that a lot of stuff is now possible to do at the one-shot prompting level. So it is just a much easier way to get into that. So quite interesting, I think, to understand how that all works together in the entry level of things. As those tools become much better, as people are getting more engaged with the production world, the new production world, if you want to call it, the barrier of entry gets much easier. Things that had a high barrier of entry, where you had to learn coding or you had to learn Figma or whatever, is just getting very low barriers of entry now. And it becomes much more, the skill set that it's shifting towards is much more, how are you able to explain to this, treat it as an assistant, the thing that you want. So fun moment for people that have really good language and explanation skills. They're really getting a big advantage boost right now versus people that had a much easier time sitting down and crunching through and learning some of these tools and skills. Now, of course, it doesn't replace the need, let's say in coding, the need to still understand some of the low-level concepts, specifically when you're working with some frameworks. But just think of it as in, like, the things that we've seen on social media recently was pretty much people using it to build like entire games or like build something in Claude 3.5 Sonnet. that is using an existing framework. So that most of them are using React or some other online frameworks. So the thing is, if you are learning the framework yourself at the beginning, that's still that's still a learning time, and that learning time is taken away, and that's also an abstraction layer that you're already learning. So you're not actually necessarily learning the low level coding skills, but you're just learning what functions to call within that application programming interface or within that um, layer that you're working with. So for this kind of stuff, AI is really good, really makes that much easier, because yeah, it really allows you to get up to speed with that much quicker. That was my little rant about that. And of course, if you're interested in some of these tools, links here, our webinars here, check it out. It's lots of tutorials there.
That's a very nice summary, but you did even more in our webinar. I remember very well. I personally learned a lot of prompting, let's say, techniques from you in our webinar, which we did together. I think it's now a couple of months ago, but
Yeah,
it is still relevant. Still, you can learn a lot of things from Leonard about prompting, and also we covered 15, if I recall correctly, 15 different AI tools with clear use cases in our webinar. You can check that if you want, please. And of course, I definitely agree. So this AI suddenly came into our lives, and now on our CVs, we need to add another skill. Talking, I think we will all need, at least to the certain degree, like minimally, we need to learn. Of course, if we are working with the computers or anything else, uh, we need to learn this prompting at the language of the AI tools, how we can talk to them. You cannot just simply open and type certain couple of words. You have to know how to build, for example, a context to get the best results, for example, from ChatGPT or Claude AI, like this incremental prompting and many other techniques you covered. I don't remember all of them now, but at least, for example, with incremental prompting, you have to build the context first, then you have to start asking your questions. And if you want to generate a photo, for example, in my cases, when I give a very detailed prompt to the AI to generate a photo, the result is not as good as I get from the minimal prompts. So you have to know which words to use in this prompting to get the best results. Of course, there is no one rule. So it is a developing. Every day I follow different people on Twitter, on X, and every day I learn new stuff talking, because experimental things are going on. Everyone, professors from many universities, even trying to find out the ways to get the best results. We are all learning, and we can learn that together.
yeah. I think it's a nice way to wrap this up for today.
Yes.
I think, yeah, this is one of the main reasons why we started this podcast, and it's podcast and live stream and whatever, that we wanted that opportunity to learn together. We're just tinkering with it, figuring it out as we're going along, and it's always interesting to see the challenges that people face. So do let us know if you are struggling with some of that stuff. Reach out to us on our social channels, and I think we would really love to help you and support you in a way that we can. And we usually are here on Wednesdays. So depending on whether one of us is on vacation or as other things happen, but you can usually catch us on Wednesdays at 11 a.m. That's when the show goes live. That's when we do the recording. Of course, you'll also find us on your favorite podcast app after the fact. So just search for the AI Academics on Spotify or Apple iTunes. It's not iTunes anymore. It's Apple Podcasts, I think. I show my age. But anyways, you know where to find it. So you can look it up there. Tune in, do it asynchronously. We'd love to get your comments on any of those channels. We'd love to see you there. It's really quite
Yes.
wonderful. So thank you again so much.
Thank you, Leonard, and thank you all of watchers, listeners, anyone interacting with us. Please check our YouTube channels as well. You can find many tutorials from Leonard and from me as well there. And see you in our next sessions.
Okay. Thank you so much. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye. I think we are still live. Are we?
We are still live. Yeah. Just I had to move my window. So yeah, goodbye everyone. Now I I found
Yeah,
the
bye.
button. See